What would you do if the people you loved most were the ones poisoning you slowly, methodically, and with a smile? My name is Christina Bennett. I'm 29 years old, a senior marketing executive based in Nashville. And for the past year, I've been quietly wondering whether I was losing my mind or if someone close to me was trying to end my career. Or worse, my life. It all came to a boiling point during a Sunday family brunch. We were at my sister-in-law Nina's house again, elegant as always. Her dining room was curated down to the napkin folds and fresh-cut hydrangeas. Everyone was laughing, passing around pastries and gossip like usual. Then James. My husband set a steaming cup of coffee in front of me. "Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey?" he asked, smiling just a little too wide. His eyes didn't match the warmth in his voice. Not anymore. I stared at the cup. It smelled wrong. There was a metallic edge to the aroma. Bitter, almost chemical. My stomach churned on instinct. For a second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Paranoia, right? But then I saw Nina sitting across from me, gently stirring her own untouched cup. Her eyes flicking toward me with what I can only describe as anticipation. "James has become quite the barista lately," she said, voice sweet but too rehearsed. "He's been trying all these new brewing techniques just for you." The emphasis on "for you" landed like a threat. I smiled thinly. How thoughtful. My mind was screaming. This wasn't just a bad feeling, it was the feeling, the one that had kept me alive over the past year. Ever since my third unexpected trip to the ER, ever since I started to suspect that Nina's hospitality came with side effects, nausea, dizziness, rashes, and once a tremor so intense I couldn't hold a pen. "Be right back," I said, standing suddenly and pretending to check my phone. "Quick call from the office." I had no intention of making any call. As I walked around the table, I stumbled on purpose just enough to make a scene. "Oh, so sorry," I exclaimed, bumping the edge of the table and catching myself awkwardly. In the shuffle, I reached for my coffee and accidentally grabbed Nina's. She blinked. "Clumsy me," I laughed. "May I use your study?" "Nina." Her tight smile returned. "Just don't break anything in there." I walked out, clutching her cup, now not mine. I didn't go far, just into the study where I could still see the dining room through the cracked door. I waited, I watched, and then I saw it. Nina picking up the switched cup, bringing it to her lips, sipping. My heart nearly burst out of my chest. What if I was wrong? What if I'd just poisoned my sister-in-law? But as seconds passed, it became very, very clear. I wasn't wrong. Her hands began to shake. Her face paled. "James," she whispered, clutching her chest. "Something's wrong." His head snapped up. What she tried to stand wobbled. "James," she gasped, "what did you put in that coffee?" He froze. His eyes darted to the two cups. His expression changed, first confusion, then realization. Horror. "That wasn't your cup," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to." But his voice wasn't quiet enough. I heard every word, and so did Nina. "You switched," she breathed, staring at me through the open study door. "You knew." I stepped out, phone already in hand recording. "You always wondered if I'd figure it out," I said calmly, "but I already had." Suddenly, Nina collapsed to the floor, her body racked with tremors. James knelt beside her, panicking. "Call an ambulance, I already had. Emergency services, we need help at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. Suspected poisoning," I said into the phone. "One female conscious but experiencing seizures." Nina's eyes, usually so cold, so calculating, were filled with something new, now fear, and James, my loving husband of 3 years. He looked at me with disbelief, as if shocked that I'd outplayed him, as if shocked that I'd dared to switch the cups. "You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting," Nina hissed through clenched teeth. "You promised it wouldn't be traced." My blood ran cold. The board meeting. My board meeting. the biggest presentation of the year for the Henderson account, a deal that could secure our firm's biggest client and one Nina had been gunning for herself. You said we just needed to discredit her, she wheezed, doubling over. Make her seem unreliable. I stared at James. You tried to poison me to ruin a presentation. His silence said everything. The sirens wailed outside. Paramedics rushed in. As Nina was loaded onto the stretcher, James followed behind them, dazed and muttering excuses. I followed too, calm, composed, because the truth was already unraveling, and I had it all on tape. You don't just wake up one day and suspect your husband wants to kill you. It happens slowly, one accident at a time. Long before that brunch, before I switched the coffee cups, before the sirens and confessions, I'd already begun to lose trust in my own reality. 3 years earlier, James had swept me off my feet. We met at a friend's wedding in Nashville. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who made you feel like the center of the universe. His family seemed warm, too, especially Nina, his cousin, but more like a sister. She ran her own marketing firm and took a special interest in me. Mentoring me, she called it. I should have seen the red flags sooner, like the accidents at formal events, her accidentally spilling wine on my new white dress at the firm's gala, or how my plate was always somehow undercooked or overspiced when she hosted dinner. Everyone laughed it off. Nina's just a bit scatterbrained, they'd say, and James, he always had an excuse. Maybe your stomach's sensitive or you probably had something earlier. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because if I didn't, what did that mean about my marriage? But then, the incidents got worse. The first real scare came in February. We had brunch at Nina's, just the three of us. Within an hour, I had severe stomach pain and dizziness. James insisted I'd probably caught a stomach bug. The ER couldn't find anything conclusive. I let it go. Then came April. We were celebrating her birthday. Nina brewed us tea herself, jasmine, with some kind of citrus. It was a beautiful afternoon until my vision blurred and I collapsed in the restroom. The ER again, blood tests, IV fluids, still no diagnosis. But Nina's reaction stayed with me. Her concern was too perfect. Her voice wavered just enough, her eyes wide but measured. And James, he seemed more annoyed than worried. That night I started a document on my phone. February 12th, Nina's brunch, stomach pain, nausea, ER visit April 3rd, Nina's birthday, tea, dizziness, blurred vision, collapse. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to track it. By June, I was hospitalized for a full weekend after eating Eggs Benedict at their house. The doctor mentioned unusual enzymes in my blood, something synthetic, nothing definitive, and still no one connected the dots. But I did. I started recording. Not everything, just little things. A comment here, a smirk there. And I bought a second phone, hidden, password protected with cloud backup and a separate number. That's when I caught one of their late-night conversations. I'd woken up around 1 a.m. James wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen on the phone. "She won't back down," he whispered. "She's presenting the Henderson pitch herself." Pause. "Then we need to act soon." The next day, he told me I looked tired. Maybe I should let Nina take the meeting. "You've been under so much pressure lately," he said, brushing my hair back. "Don't burn out." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about love. It was about control, about making me small enough to be dismissed, but not so sick anyone could prove it. I also began to notice how often James visited Nina's office. He said they were working on a surprise for our anniversary. I didn't confront him. I just kept observing. One night, he left his laptop open. My hands trembled as I opened his messages. One thread with Nina stood out. They spoke in codes, brews, batches, morning mix. But one message chilled me, Nina. "She's tougher than we thought." "James, I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the boardroom." I sent the messages to my backup account, took screenshots, saved them to an external drive, hid it in a cosmetic bag inside a drawer only I used. But still, I hesitated. Because even with all the signs, I couldn't fully accept it. I was married to this man. Nina had once helped me pick my wedding dress. And yet, that metallic coffee smell kept coming back to me. the way she smirked whenever I excused myself early from family dinners. James's odd timing, his insistence that I take it easy whenever a big presentation loomed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was war, silent, cruel, and calculated. But they underestimated one thing: me. I'd spent my whole life working twice as hard to be taken seriously in this industry. I dealt with being talked over in meetings, having my ideas pitched back to me by male colleagues, being told I was too intense when I stood my ground. This was just another boardroom, and I was done playing nice. They thought they'd make me sick, miss a meeting, fall behind. But what they didn't expect was that I'd make them talk. From the study, I could still see James kneeling next to Nina, who was trembling violently. Her lips were pale, her body weak. She was trying to speak, but the words slurred. And James, my husband, was in full panic mode. "That wasn't your cup," he kept muttering, like saying it enough times would erase what happened. "But you switched them." Nina croaked, staring at me, eyes wide. "You knew." I didn't deny it. I stepped forward, my phone still recording. I knew. James looked up sharply. "You, Christina, what are you doing? What I should have done months ago." The front door burst open. EMTs rushed in with equipment. I gave them space, but stayed close enough to make sure everything was captured. "My sister-in-law is experiencing severe tremors," I said calmly to one of the paramedics. "It began shortly after drinking coffee prepared by my husband. You might want to run a toxicology screen." He raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Got it. Let's stabilize her first." As they loaded Nina onto the stretcher, she gripped the medic's sleeve. "Tell them it was a mistake," she begged, voice barely audible. "Tell them." But it was too late. Her voice had already betrayed her, and I had it all on tape. James tried to follow her out. "I'll go with her to the hospital," I stepped between them. "No, I'll go. After all, she made that coffee just for me. Remember?" He blinked, stunned. "She trusted you," I added. "That was your job, right? Make it look like love." I didn't wait for an answer. I climbed into the ambulance, sat across from Nina's semi-conscious body, and didn't say a word as we sped toward Nashville General. Inside the hospital, chaos met us at the doors. Nurses, monitors, beeping machines. They wheeled Nina away. I waited quietly in the corridor, phone in my lap, thumb hovering over the replay button. 20 minutes later, a nurse called for family. James hadn't shown up yet, probably pacing somewhere, trying to figure out how to spin it. "I'm her sister-in-law," I said, following the nurse through double doors. We passed curtained bays until she led me to Nina's room. She was hooked up to monitors now. Her color had returned slightly, but her eyes flicked toward me with something unfamiliar respect, or maybe defeat. Dr. Phillips, a tall woman with calm eyes and sharp instincts, stood at the foot of the bed. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "can you tell me exactly what happened before your sister-in-law became ill?" I held up my phone. "I think you should hear this first." I hit play. The audio crackled. Then came Nina's voice. "This is all your fault. Just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting. And you promised it wouldn't be traced." I watched Dr. Phillips's expression shift from clinical interest to concern to alarm. "This is very serious," she said, making notes. "We found substances in her system that should not be in any normal kitchen or coffee. One of them is typically used in pharmaceutical testing, controlled compound." I nodded. "She's been doing this for months. So has my husband." Just then, I saw James outside the room. He stepped into the hallway, face pale and shiny with sweat. "Christina," he started, lifting his hands. "Let me explain." Dr. Phillips moved to block him. "Security to room 412, please." "This is all a misunderstanding," James pleaded. "She's confused. She didn't know what she was saying." I pulled out the screenshots from his messages. "So these texts between you and Nina discussing how to keep me out of commission were just casual banter." His mouth opened, then shut. "You went through my phone," he whispered, horrified. "After I found the syringes in your desk drawer, yes, I did." Security guards arrived. James took a step back but didn't run. He wasn't dumb, just caught. "Doctor," I said, "I've been to the hospital 3 times in 6 months. Same symptoms, same vague diagnoses. Can we test my blood too? See if it matches, Dr. Phillips nodded. We'll run full comparisons. The guards kept James outside. I turned back toward Nina. She was watching all of this, silently absorbing the shift in power. Detective Mendoza arrived an hour later, a veteran investigator who'd seen every kind of domestic betrayal. She didn't flinch as I laid out the recordings, the texts, the notes from my symptom log. Her face barely moved. You started tracking this when she asked. Since February, you kept logs, every incident, time symptoms, what I ate, who was there. I have backups too. I handed over my second phone. There are more recordings here. You'll hear Nina saying the Henderson account was worth millions, that they just needed me to miss enough meetings for clients to doubt my reliability. Mendoza nodded slowly. This was never about health. This was strategic sabotage, and it nearly escalated to something much worse. She wasn't wrong, because if I hadn't switched the cups, I might not be standing here. Sometimes the people closest to you wear the best masks until they slip, and when they do, you don't just see who they really are. You see what they were willing to become. James sat slumped in a hallway chair flanked by 2 security officers. He wouldn't look at me. Not directly. His hands were fidgeting in his lap like a nervous child caught in a lie too big to escape. Dr. Phillips returned with my toxicology results. Her eyes said everything before her mouth moved. Mrs. Bennett, we found clear patterns, she said. Elevated traces of the same synthetic compound found in Nina's system today. Lower concentrations consistent with long-term exposure. It aligns with the symptoms you reported in your hospital visits. I swallowed hard, even though I knew, knowing and hearing it from a doctor hit differently. Thank you, I said, my voice quiet. Dr. Phillips looked toward Nina's room. She's stabilizing, but the dosage today was dangerously high. If you'd consumed it... She didn't need to finish. I nodded. I understand. Detective Mendoza rejoined us, her posture calm but commanding. We're requesting a warrant for both their homes and Nina's office. Also the pharmaceutical company where these compounds originated. Any idea how they obtained them? I might, I replied. James had a college friend in medical research. I overheard him mention him once, bragging that he could get anything. Mendoza made a note. We'll follow that lead. A commotion drew our attention down the hall. James was arguing now, voice strained and frantic. You don't understand. We were trying to help her. Mendoza stepped forward. Help her how Mr. Bennett. She was overworked, James insisted, pushing herself too hard, skipping meals, sleeping 3 hours a night. We thought if she got sick, maybe she'd rest. By poisoning her. No, he shouted, then lowered his voice quickly. Not poisoning, just slowing her down. Nina said if she missed a few meetings, it'd force her to take a break. I stepped in, arms crossed. Let me ask you this, James. What was the plan if I had drunk the coffee this morning? What would have happened? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. It wasn't about concern, it was about control, about ambition, about Nina's desperation to land the Henderson account. And James, he went along with it, because power and proximity meant more than marriage vows. Mendoza cut in sharp and unyielding. That's not protection, Mr. Bennett. That's premeditation. His shoulders sank. He looked through the hospital glass window into Nina's room. She saw him too pale, weak, terrified. Not of the police, but of exposure. It was over. Dr. Phillips re-entered holding a new tablet. Her expression had shifted from clinical detachment to quiet fury. We just got a call from a detective downtown, she said. A search of Mr. Bennett's office uncovered several vials of the same compound stored improperly, along with handwritten notes documenting what appears to be dosages and observed reactions dated and labeled. I froze. You kept records? I asked James, barely containing my rage. You treated my body like a lab experiment. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Behind us, Mendoza's voice was cold. We'll take that as a yes. 2 officers approached. "Ma'am, we have what we need. They'll both be taken into custody for further questioning." James panicked. Wait, Christina. We never meant for this to get out of hand. Nina said it would just be for a little while until the account passed. Until I failed enough that I'd be forced to step aside, I replied, my voice steady. "You wanted me out of the picture." He shook his head. "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it?" I took a step closer. "What about the Christmas party?" The spiked punch. The one that sent me to urgent care for dehydration and nausea silence. His eyes darted again to the floor, to the guards, anywhere but to me. "I see," I said. "So it was like that." Mendoza gave the signal. "We're formally detaining both suspects. Charges will be discussed once all toxicology is complete." As the officers moved to restrain James, I saw something shift in Nina's room. She was sitting up now, watching everything unfold. Her face, once poised and confident, was tight with fear. She wasn't scheming anymore. She was cornered. Dr. Phillips turned toward her. The concentration in the coffee was much higher than the levels found in Mrs. Bennett's previous visits, she stated. If Christina had consumed it today, it wouldn't have been a minor reaction. It would have been fatal. Nina looked away. Mendoza moved in. "Ms. Anderson, do you understand the gravity of what we're dealing with?" Nina didn't answer. I stepped forward, stopping just before the threshold of her room. "I want you to hear this from me," I said. "Every time I got sick, every time I lost a client or missed a presentation, every night I sat alone in a hospital bed, you were there, smiling, pretending, taking notes. Still no response. But I saw it in her eyes. That flicker, that shift. The mask had finally cracked. Courtrooms are strange places. They don't just hold justice, they hold silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The kind where every truth is dragged into the light, and every lie dies choking. It took 6 months for the case to go to trial. By then, James and Nina had both been formally charged with attempted murder conspiracy and unlawful possession of controlled substances. The evidence was overwhelming, but even so, I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to face them in court. They looked smaller somehow, worn, stripped of their polish. James couldn't meet my eyes. Nina tried briefly, then looked away, her confidence crumbling like ash. The prosecution laid everything out piece by piece. The recordings, the toxicology results, the bottles found in James's desk, the digital logs from my phone detailing every incident. Even their text messages casually discussing my reaction timeline were read aloud for the jury. It was methodical, unforgiving, and devastating. Dr. Phillips gave the most damning testimony. Calm and clinical, she explained how the synthetic compound they used was originally developed for lab testing and not approved for human consumption. "It accumulates," she told the courtroom. "Over time, it weakens the nervous system, and in higher doses, as we found in the coffee that day, it can induce seizures, cardiac arrest, even death." There were audible gasps. But I didn't flinch. I sat tall, staring straight ahead, even when the defense tried to blame stress and psychosomatic symptoms. Even when they implied I'd exaggerated my illness to frame them. It was desperate, and the jury saw through it. They called it jealousy, but it was deeper than that. It was erasure. Nina had built her reputation on controlling every room she walked into. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone younger, faster, and more effective. And James, he just wanted proximity to power. When my light started shining brighter than hers, he picked a side. It wasn't mine. A week into the trial, Mendoza revealed a chilling detail I hadn't even known. There's evidence Nina may have done something similar to a former colleague, she testified, an intern who suddenly dropped out after a mysterious illness. She never pressed charges, but she submitted a statement after news of this case broke. The courtroom fell silent. I turned slowly toward Nina. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. They weren't just sabotaging me. They had a pattern. The closing argument from the prosecution was short and brutal. They didn't just try to hurt Mrs. Bennett, the prosecutor said. They studied her, tracked her reactions like scientists studying an experiment. And when she didn't break, They raised the dosage. This wasn't sabotage. This was attempted murder. I barely breathed as the jury filed back in, hours later with their verdict. Guilty, on all counts. Nina's jaw clenched. James exhaled as if he hadn't realized he was holding his breath. The judge didn't mince words in the sentencing. The premeditated nature of this crime, the sustained duration, and the clear escalation of harm leave this court no choice, she said firmly. You are each sentenced to the maximum term allowed under Tennessee law. When they were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, neither of them looked at me. And I didn't need them to, because this wasn't about them anymore. It was about what they tried to steal: my health, my career, my future, and how I took it all back. Exactly 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, the same stage Nina once fought to keep me from reaching. I looked out at the sea of suits and eager eyes. Somewhere in the front row sat the Henderson client, smiling warmly. I want to talk to you about resilience, I said, my voice clear and even. Because sometimes the biggest threats to your success don't come from outside competition. They come from the people closest to you, the ones who say they love you. I let the words hang in the air, but surviving those challenges, I continued, doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you unstoppable. The applause was thunderous. Later, a young woman approached me bright-eyed, maybe mid-20s, and said, "How did you keep going? How did you stay calm while everyone around you was lying?" I smiled gently, because I trusted what I saw. I trusted my gut. And when that wasn't enough, I built a case no one could deny. That night, back in my apartment, I received an email from the Henderson team. They were renewing our contract for 3 more years. I laughed softly. Somewhere, in a Tennessee prison, Nina and James were just beginning their sentence. The local paper had run a small piece on it that morning. I didn't read it. Instead, I opened the pitch deck for my next client. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's making them irrelevant. Some betrayals cut so deep you never really go back to who you were. But maybe that's the point. Maybe you're not supposed to. A few days after my speech at the conference, I found myself walking alone along the pedestrian bridge downtown, the same bridge James once proposed on. I hadn't been back since the trial. It was dusk, golden light spilling over the Cumberland River, cool breeze brushing past. For a long time, I'd thought of that bridge as a lie, a monument to a moment that meant nothing. But now, it just felt like a place. He couldn't touch the meaning anymore. I'd reclaimed that too. My phone buzzed with a new message from my firm's CEO. Incredible speech. We'd like you to mentor our new executive team. I smiled. And that's when it hit me. James and Nina had tried to break me, not because I was weak, but because I wasn't. I was rising too fast, gaining too much respect, taking up space they believed belonged to them, and because I didn't apologize for it. After the trial, people asked me if I felt victorious. Victory isn't the word I use. The truth is, I felt free. Free from the slow poison of doubt. From pretending not to notice how small they tried to make me feel. From all the second guessing that came with every dismissive glance, every twisted smile. James had once said, "You're too intense, Christina, too focused." But that intensity, that focus, it saved my life, and I wasn't about to apologize for it anymore. A month after the sentencing, I started a side project, a confidential support group for professional women navigating toxic workplaces or family entanglements. It started as a small online forum. Today, it's a network of over 600 members across the country. We call it Unbreakable, because that's what we are. One night, I received a handwritten letter from someone I'd never met. It was from a woman named Tara, the intern. Nina allegedly sabotaged years ago. She wrote, "I saw your story. I recognized the patterns. I wasn't crazy. I just didn't have proof. But because of you, I finally feel seen." That letter shook me more than any courtroom testimony, because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was bigger. It was about every person who's ever been told they're too much, only to realize the world just wasn't ready for them yet. It was about every woman who's been smiled at while someone was quietly pulling the rug from beneath her. And it was about choosing again and again not to become what hurt you. Do I forgive them? I don't know. Maybe someday. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. What I do know is this. Every time they thought they'd silenced me, I listened harder. Every time they tried to weaken me, I grew stronger. And every time they underestimated me, they lost. I still have that backup phone, still have the audio files, the notes, the screenshots. Not because I plan to use them, but because they remind me of the version of me that refused to back down. The one who, even while shaking, stood her ground. She's still here, and she's not going anywhere. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt like the villain in someone else's story just because you dared to shine, know this. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to survive. And then rise, louder, braver, smarter, and unbreakable. So let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have supported you? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from scratch. And if you're new here, subscribe for more stories that remind you the people who tried to bury you didn't realize you were a seed.